I reviewed both of these watches not so long ago. These two divers are among the top sellers on San Martin AliExpress shop, and I also enjoy both of these watches, and they are in my current rotation, so I do get to wear them quite a bit. And despite very similar looks, there are of course some key distinct differences between these two watches, and in this video we'll do a bit of a deep dive into those details, as well as talk about what I've learned after a few months of ownership and experience with these watches, and hopefully this video will help you if you are in the process of deciding between these two. So let's get right in. Hello and welcome to the channel. If you enjoy talking and learning about watches, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any new videos. Right, to keep things short and to the point, I will cover the similarities first. There are quite a few of them, which of course gives an impression that these two watches are so similar. I will then go over the key differences, do wrist shots, and of course I'll talk about the price. And of course, I did reviews of both of these watches in the past, so for further details on each of them, I recommend you do watch those videos, and I will leave links to them in the description. So, similarities. Both watches ship in pretty much identical same packaging, including a set of tools to adjust the bracelets. Both watches have stainless steel construction and sapphire crystals. Both feature strong lume. The bezels are 120 clicks, unidirectional, and have ceramic inserts. Both watches feature 200 meters of water resistance, and both have automatic mechanical movements. However, of course, the movements are different. And to round up the similarities, both watches have almost identical bracelets and the clasp. And now the differences. Well, the larger watch is, of course, a homage to a Tudor Black Bay 58, and this Retro Diver 6200 is a homage to a vintage Rolex Submariner reference 6538, which was released around 1958. I must say that, in my opinion, San Martin deserves some credit in putting a bit of their own spin on the designs, while of course still leaving very little doubt to what watches they are paying tribute to. Now, based on the comments in the review videos, San Martin's slight originality is a bit divisive. Some viewers like it, and some are adamant that San Martin should have stuck as close as possible to the Tudor and Rolex looks. Personally, I do welcome some originality. I also think that the changes that San Martin did are definitely not to the detriment of the practicality of both of these watches. So, price and availability options. So this Retro Diver is available only in black, gold and stainless steel colorway like this one I have here, and generally expect to pay somewhere around $230 for it, which I think is a great deal. This Tudor Homage is available in two colorways, black and blue, and with two movement options, a Hong Kong Precision Technologies PT5000 and a Swiss-made Sellita SW200, priced $330 and $460 respectively, based on the movement chosen. I have a black version with PT5000 movement here, and I will discuss movement and a price a bit more later in this video. Dimensions. For simplicity, I'll put the dimensions on the screen. The case 9 to 3 measurements are 40 and 38 mm respectively, clearly two different cases, even though the finishing and designs are very similar. The bezel diameters are 40.5 and 39 mm, so visually the Black Bay 58 Homage is a bigger watch. However, it is also a slimmer watch, measuring about 11.5 mm in height, while this Retro 6200 Diver has a case height of 13 mm. Both watches have 20mm lugs, which is great because both watches do very well with different straps. Now, the lug tip to lug tip on the Tudor Homage is just under 48mm, which will allow this watch to be very versatile when it comes to different wrist sizes, however, not on the supplied bracelet. The distance between the protruding end links is about 54.5mm, and that creates a bit of a problem if you have a wrist slimmer than 6.5 inches. The Retro Diver uses very similar protruding end links. As a matter of fact, the current version on sale has almost identical end links shape. However, due to an overall smaller size of this retro diver watch, the end-link to end-link is considerably more compact, measuring about 52 mm. I will talk more about the end-links when we examine the bracelet in more detail. And we have a nice taper on the bracelet from about 20 mm at the clasp down to 18 mm if we measure the rivets and 16.5 if we don't, and the clasp is about 18 mm wide. On a fully supplied stainless steel bracelet, the Black Bay Homage weighs about 145 grams and the Retro Diver is about 140 grams. Dials. I think both dials are done very well. What stands out is the use of technology and the quality of the execution. San Martin used here something they call JS Craft technology, which apparently allows for a razor-sharp mirror finish on the hands and on our indices faces, where the hour indices are applied. The Retro Diver has printed hour indices and printed branding, well in line with the vintage aesthetics of this watch. The hands are long and elegant, with a prominent lollipop second hand and a familiar Mercedes hour hand. Both watches feature matte black background, which allows for a golden color hands and indices to really stand out, making both watches very legible indeed. Looking at the Black Bay Homage, well, while the Retro Diver has a retro aesthetics, this watch has definitely a more contemporary look. Well-applied hour indices and the San Martin logo at 12 o'clock, well-proportioned snowflake-style hands, generously filled with lume, and a very minimalistic writing at 6 o'clock. Both watches have a very good lume, and the Black Bay Homage has a slight edge here, and I think that's mostly because of a higher or bigger lume area on the hour and minute hands, as we can see it on the lume footage. And I think it's worthwhile to add that I couldn't find any quality control issues on these dials. Both dials are very well crafted and put together. Crystals. Both watches have domed sapphire crystals. The Retro Diver has a slightly elevated crystal with a bit more curvature to it, again in line with the vintage aesthetics, giving this watch that nice and warm look of a domed acrylic crystal that was originally used on vintage Rolexes, and at the same time giving it a clarity and the toughness of the sapphire crystal. Both crystals have anti-reflective coating and both have interesting distortion at the sharp viewing angles, adding further to the charm of these two watches and at the same time still keeping them very legible. Bezels. We have 120 clicks unidirectional ceramic inserts bezels here. The color schemes on both bezels are very similar, however the bezel on the Tudor Homage is a bit wider and has a red triangle at 12 o'clock with a lumed peep, obviously giving a nod to a Tudor Black Bay watch color scheme. Both bezels are almost flat and glossy and kind of reflective, not destructively reflective, but reflective nevertheless. Now, I know, based on the comments to both reviews of these watches, the ceramic bezel on both watches are a bit divisive. Some viewers are happy with the ceramic and some are absolutely adamant that the only aluminium inserts would do, in line with the Tudor and vintage Rolex watches. However, personally, after brushing both watches against door corners and furniture, by accident of course, I was thankful quite a few times that these were not aluminium inserts, which would definitely have been scratched by now. And, of course, we must not forget the bezel actions. 120 clicks, the resistance is good, the bezels are easy to grip and pretty much have no backplay on neither of these two bezels. Both bezels have a nice, reassuring, crisp sound, and both align pretty much perfectly. Looking at the cases, the finishing on both watches is very good, brushing on top and the flanks and polished beveled edges. The Retro Diver is basically a smaller version of the Black Bay Homage. Both watches have ever so slightly curved lugs, no crown guards and sterile back cases. The Retro Diver back case does bulge a bit more than the other watch due to the use of an H35 movement, which is a bit thicker than the PT5000 movement used in Tudor Homage. Both watches have screw-down crowns with San Martin shark logo, and both these San Martin watches declare 200 meters of water resistance, of course, making both of these watches quite practical. Movements. If we are to look for a major reason that drives the price difference between these two watches, then, in my opinion, it is the movement. This San Martin houses the caliber PT5000 movement, which is a clone of a very popular ETA 2824 Swiss movement, which beats at 28,800 vibrations per hour and gives us that smooth second-hand sweep. And this retro diver houses Seiko Instruments NH35 movement, which is about 2 to 2.5 times cheaper and beats at a bit lower frequency of 21,600 vibrations per hour. Both watches are very accurate, so no complaints there. And of course, neither of these watches have a date function, while the movements in them do, which results in so-called ghost position of the crown. Not a big deal, but something to keep in mind. From experience of using these two movements, well, the NH35 might be cheaper, however, it is smooth and a pleasure to operate in this retro diver. The PT5000 is meant to be more expensive and more sophisticated movement because it does beat at a high frequency, which is supposed to give us higher accuracy and a smoother sweep, and it also has a quick date switch, which is actually irrelevant on these no-date watches. So, in spite of all of these qualities, I found the PT5000 movement operation not as smooth as Seiko NH35. It is not bad, but it does take a bit more effort when you hand-wind the watch. I compared it to the other ETA clone watches that I have in my collection, like this LOBINNI watch, which uses similar ETA clone but manufactured by Seagull, and it feels exactly the same. So I guess it is a feature rather than a problem then. Well, I will talk a bit more about the PT5000 caliber in the conclusion of this video. Bracelets. Well, bracelets on these watches are almost identical. I went into quite a deep level of details when covering the bracelets and clasp in my review videos of these watches, so do check them out. The bracelets are well engineered and well finished. The rivets are a bit divisive, I know, however, I personally don't mind, and of course the rivets go in line with the aesthetics of both of these watches. Also, while wearing these watches, I've come to like the satin finish of this bracelet, and it looks like this finish hides the scratches very well. In the same time, the mirror polish sides of the links add a bit of a subtle sparkle to the bracelets that would look quite utilitarian otherwise, in my opinion. The more I wear these watches, the more I appreciate the bracelets and the clasp. Okay, so what has been my experience so far with these two watches? Well, they're still in my collection and I really do have more positive to say about them than negative, so let's get the negative stuff out of the way first. Okay, I already mentioned, and I think quite a few times, that these both watches would definitely benefit from some kind of on-the-fly extension on the bracelet. And if we look at the actual individual watches, starting with this retro diver, well, actually it's very difficult for me to find anything to complain about. Okay, maybe the case thickness. 13mm is a bit on the thicker side, and San Martin could have shaved here a millimeter or so, and this would make this watch a bit more comfortable on the wrist. Not that it's already not so, and also thinner case profile would make it more suitable for a NATO style and Bund style straps, which I think work very nicely with aesthetics of both watches. And also the end links. However, I think on the latest updates of end links for this watch, the end links are more refined and don't have this a bit of a strange crease like on my watch. And well, that's pretty much about it with this one. And if we look at the San Martin Tudor Homage watch, well, I'm still not convinced about the end links design. I think the inverted end links, like on actual Tudor Black Bay watch, for example, would be more suitable. However, after wearing this watch for a few weeks, I kind of got used to how it looks and sits on my wrist, and it is not as bad as I first imagined when I've got this watch a couple of months ago. Now, another area where I would suggest to be a bit cautious is the PT5000 movement. Since the release of this watch, there were few complaints about the movement, especially in the area of crown operation. The silver lining here is that the issue tends to manifest itself quite quickly, so if you get the watch with the issue, this can be taken up with San Martin and AliExpress pretty swiftly. Alternatively, you can of course go for a more robust and reputable Sellita SW200 Swiss-made movement in this watch. However, this will get the price tag of this watch into $450 US territory. Okay, so what is good about these watches? Well, both watches have a lot of good quality lume. I know a lot of macro brands these days go quite generous on the lume. However, as bang for a buck goes, these San Martin watches give a run for their money to most competition. Second, the quality of the execution and design. The finishing of the metal surfaces, the dials, the bezel action on both watches are excellent. And another point which is quite important for me is a degree of originality in the design. In my humble opinion, both watches could be future collectibles and not just cheap budget clomages that can be disposed of in a year or so. So here you have it. What is your take on these two watches, and did you end up getting one of them or both of them, and what has been your experience so far? Please let us know in the comments. And if you find this review helpful, don't forget to smash that like button and of course subscribe if you haven't already done so. And as always, thank you for watching, take care, and I will see you in the next one.